These are some of the questions that you guys had from last class. So why doesn't jQuery autofill in Sublime like CSS or HTML? So that is because jQuery is a library and not a language. So there's no syntax built into Sublime for jQuery. But there is for JavaScript. So it's going to do the same like syntax highlighting, but it's not going to like autocomplete. It's only going to autocomplete for JavaScript. So where exactly do we need semicolons? And that's going to be at the end of each statement. So that's a little way to remember it is like whenever you want the computer to execute something, then you would put a semicolon. So like at the end of like each step. And we'll see that a little more today. Is there a good animated gallery of jQuery effects along with the labels? So unfortunately, like there's just like the jQuery dots or the W3 schools link that I sent you. There's no real good like representation of like all of the methods side by side to like what they actually do. If you want, you guys can make it maybe. If you're feeling ambitious. So is there a way to make text size responsive? And there is, and we'll learn more about that when we get to responsive design. But in the meantime, you guys can use percents or this one thing called EM. So EM is a CSS unit that you guys can use. And the reason why right now it's not really responsive is because we're using pixels. And pixels are the same for all screen sizes. They're not going to be responsive at all. But we'll get to that before break. Okay, so when do you use JavaScript instead of jQuery? And really, it's whatever you want. So if you are getting like some weird error that you'll see what might happen is sometimes like in the console you'll see something weird that's like jQuery and then like whatever version, whatever, and then min.js and then it'll tell you like line 119 or something. So when it does something like that, that means something might be going on with how like you're trying to use jQuery. So either you're not using jQuery properly, or whatever you're trying to use jQuery for isn't meant to do it. So then you might want to use JavaScript instead. Okay, so today we are going to learn variables and different data types. And we're also going to learn logic in jQuery and JavaScript. So we'll see what all this means. Just know that we're trying to get to this by the end of the day. So if you guys don't understand this by the end of the day, let me know, because you should. But first of all, let's review from last class. So what is jQuery? Who wants to like sum it up? Yeah, so it's a library that's written in JavaScript, and it just makes things a lot easier for us versus having to write a lot of code in JavaScript and end up with like a super long file. We can just do like one-liners that'll do basically the same thing. And it's just for that interactivity on your website. So remember, JavaScript is the behavior of your website. And also, a good thing about jQuery is it is very cross-browser reliable, so it'll work on all browsers. So this is just to illustrate like JavaScript versus jQuery. So with jQuery, what's nice about it is to select things, plus you just have to do the $sign and then either a tag name or a class or an ID. So it works pretty much very similar to CSS. So very easy to use. And again, with jQuery, all you have to do is select whatever you're trying to work with and then use a method, a jQuery method, in order to do something. So when you are using jQuery, you want to keep your files organized. So you're probably going to have a JavaScript or a JS folder, or a scripts folder, some people call it. And you're going to have all of your JavaScript files in there, including jQuery, if you downloaded it. So when you're adding jQuery to your website, there are two ways. So you can either download it and have it locally stored on your computer, or you can use a CDN, so Content Distribution Network. And that's going to be like what I showed you last class with Google. So they're going to host jQuery for you, and then you just have to link it to your website. So again, let me just show you guys as a reminder. If you do jQuery, Google CDN, it'll bring you up to here. So like hosted libraries. And then they host like many different libraries. And then you just need to go down to where they have jQuery. And they have different versions. So 3 is going to be the newest version. 1 is going to be the oldest. And then they have like all of the listed versions. And they'll even like make a note of like why like they don't have some version. So in this case, these versions aren't hosted due to their short and unstable lives in the wild. Okay, thank you, Google. So then you would just need to copy this and then paste it into your HTML, which we'll go over right now. So when you're adding it to your HTML file, you're going to want it to add it like in the bottom of your body. That way you have like all your content loaded first before you attach any events to it. And then you're also going to want to load jQuery before you load your actual JavaScript file. Do you guys remember why?
It will not show up properly.
Yeah. So it's going to throw an error and say like, I don't know what $sign means.
Because it would just be put in before.
Exactly. Yeah, because your browser is going to read it like this and be like, oh, I need to load this first, and then I'll load this after it. And so the reason why is because we wanted to recognize jQuery, so like the $sign and whatever syntax that we're using, in order to use it in our JavaScript file. Okay. So in CSS and HTML, we have comments that we're able to use, and they're different in each one. So in JavaScript, this is a comment for a single line, or if you want to do multi-line, you have to do the slash and the star. But you don't have to memorize it if you're using the Sublime shortcut, the command slash, and then it'll automatically do it for you. Which is nice because every language is different in the way that you have to do comments. Okay. So with jQuery, like I mentioned before, you need to kind of tell it what you want to work with. So if you want to work with your LIs, then you're going to select it in this manner. So in jQuery syntax, it's $sign, parentheses, and and then in quotes, whatever you're trying to work with. So in this case, it's an LI. It could be a class name. So if it was a class name, then it would be dot, and then whatever the class name. Or if it was an ID, it would be the hashtag and then the ID name. So this is just a quick chart that you can use to refer to like how you would select things in jQuery, and it's the same as CSS. And then you're gonna tell it like what you want it to do. So after you select whatever you want to work with, then you have to tell it what method to use. So in this case, we are selecting our allies, and we're adding a class selected to it. And then again, don't forget that semicolon. So that semicolon is needed because that's the end of like what we want to do.
Does it matter if you use quotation marks or the apostrophe? I've noticed that sometimes, like on W through schools, they have it, like, do you see how you're using the apostrophe and selected? But then on W through schools, they're using quotation marks.
So it doesn't matter. But what does matter is if you are, so first of all, you have to be consistent. So if you're using double quotes, then you can't do like double quotes and then the apostrophe to end it. It has to be the same. But otherwise, what matters is if you are like copying and pasting code from like other websites, then it might not paste properly. So if you ever notice that like in Sublime, it'll show like this and then like that. Like, yeah, when you paste code in, it doesn't always interpret it right. So you're gonna want to delete whatever apostrophes or quotes that they use and replace them with your own. That way it reads it properly. Okay. So with jQuery methods, you can essentially do 4 big things. So first, we can use it to find elements on our web page. And what's the term for that? Do you guys remember? Traversing the DAO? That's a fancy, yeah, I know. Okay, so when you're going through your HTML document, that's called traversing the DOM. And yeah, it's just fancy talk. So these are just some methods that you can use in order to do that. So first of all, there's find, and that's just gonna find like all the descendants of whatever you want. So in this case, we are selecting an H1 and we're saying like find the link inside of this H1. And if there's more than one link, then it would find all of them, essentially. And you can do the same, so you can find children or parents or siblings of whatever you want. The second big thing that you can do is you can get and set content of your website. So, for example, if I ever wanted to change my HTML of something, so like in this case I'm saying like H1, I want it to say content to insert goes here for whatever reason. I can do that in jQuery. I can actively change my source of an image. So say I have like an image carousel that I want to change the picture of every time the user clicks next or whatever. Then I can use this method to change the image source actively to whatever I want. There's a method for CSS, so you can add class, remove class. Any questions so far? Cool. So after we selected whatever, so The next big thing that we can do is we can add effects or animations to whatever we selected. So these are just some examples of what you can do really quickly. So for example, you can fade in and fade out, slide up, slide down. So slide up is just gonna like slide something up until you can't see it anymore. Slide down is gonna do the same thing but down. Do you guys remember slide toggle?
I don't really know how to explain it by itself. I know that's toggling when you have a little hamburger menu.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like I think it's compacting the menu, I guess. I can't really explain it.
So what slide toggle is going to do is if it's there on the page or whatever, then when you slide toggle it, it's either going to like go away or come back. So it just depends on like the state of the object itself. So it's going to toggle it, and I'll show you guys later. Okay. So finally, the last big thing that you can do with jQuery is you can create event listeners. So for example, here we're making a click event listener. So we're saying like if the user clicks on a list item, then we're going to do whatever we say here. And these are just different click or events that you can add to that on statement. So you can select whatever you want to work with, and then you can do key down, key up, mouse down, mouse over. If you have a form, you can do like if the user submits that form, do something, whatever you want. And you'll just replace whatever goes in here with one of those. So in jQuery, a nice thing that you have access to is method chaining. So you can do a lot of things in one line, and it'll just read it in order of things to do. So as far as method chaining goes, if it gets too long, then I would recommend that you split it to a different line. That way it's easier to read. Finally, debugging. So when we're using jQuery, we want to get used to debugging our problems in this fashion. So if something doesn't work, I want to be going up to you and be like, so what doesn't work? And I want you to be able to tell me. And not just say like, oh, nothing works. It's just a mess or whatever. So I want you to either like tell me like, you know, the image isn't moving, be specific in that sense. Or if literally nothing works, then that's going to help us solve our problem too. So if the image isn't moving, then it's probably something to do with that specific section of your code. Otherwise, if none of the code works, then we're probably going to want to check your console to make sure that, first of all, you have jQuery linked up properly. Second of all, to make sure that you don't have any syntax errors in your code. So with jQuery, a lot of our errors are going to show up in the console. And it's going to give us a message saying what's wrong and kind of give us a hint as to how to fix it. And it's going to tell us where in our code it is. So in this case, it's going to be on line 13. It's telling me like it's going to be in my main.js file on line 13. The next level of debugging is to console log something. So this is very useful just to check information. So you can either console log messages like throughout your code just to make sure that when the computer is reading your JavaScript file that it's getting to like certain parts of your code. So say like your click function isn't working You might want to put a console log in your click function and then see if when you click on that thing, if that console log shows up. Because if it does show up, then that means that your click is working, but something might be wrong inside of your code. Versus if it's not showing up, then something's going on with the actual click function. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Because then it would be getting to that, inside of that click function. Okay. So let's review. Go ahead and in your starter code, open up that jQuery review. And I'll give you these exercises. I'm going to get you guys started. So right here, I'm probably going to want to select my Circle 2 class and then do dot fade in. So how would I get started with this? So when the user puts their mouse over trigger, what do I want to select? So $, parentheses, quotes, trigger. And then what method am I using? Any idea? Let's go back and let's see. So these are different events I can use. What do you think, maybe?
Mouse.
Yes. So not only mouse, but mouse over. Let's try that. So on, and then mouse over. And then what? comma, what am I missing?
Function.
Yep. So what I have right now is I'm selecting this ID trigger and I'm saying on mouse over. So when the user has their mouse over this trigger ID, then I'm going to want to do this. I'm going to do whatever I want to do in here. So in this case, I'm going to add a li to the beginning of my list that contains the text 1. Okay, so it's telling me that I need the prepend method. So any guesses on how we can do this? What do I need to select first of all? And which li? Well, I want to add an li to the beginning of my list. So I'm actually going to want to select that my list. And then let's see what this prepend method does. So let's look up prepend. I'm going to go to Google. I'm going to look up prepend jQuery. Let's go to the documentation and see what that does. Okay, so it tells me it inserts content specified by the parameter to the beginning of each element in the set of matched elements. So let's see how they use it. Oh, so I actually have to put in a tag to add. So let's see how it works. In the bottom, there should be a demo. Yep, here it is. So right here, what's it doing? Dear friend. Okay, so right here we're selecting the paragraph. And right now the paragraphs only say their friend and amigo. And what this does is it's adding this thing in front of the paragraph because we're selecting the paragraph. So what do we want to do for our code? If we want to add another li here, that looks like this. But instead of 2, it's 1. How would I do that? What would I prepend? Any idea? Okay, so let's try doing li1 and let's see what happens. Then I need a semicolon. Reveal in Finder. You saw that? Every time I mouse over, it's adding 1 to the page now. Yeah, wow. So the way prepend works is you have to give it an HTML tag. Yeah, so I'm adding this to my HTML at the beginning of my list. So if I go to my HTML, I have this unordered list, my list. So it's big. Exactly, yeah. So my JavaScript is going to add it to the beginning of this list. Okay, so now I need to add a li to the end of my list. So how would I do that? And it's saying I need to do the append jQuery.
Can I see how code can you please? Because my circle isn't working. I think I missed
So how would I do this part? No problem. Any idea? Yep. So I'm gonna go my list and then dot append. And what am I appending? Li. What am I missing?
None of my, like, my fan in, my arm, and append aren't turning blue, but my code's the exact same as yours.
Mine's not working either.
Let me see.
Oh.
Yeah. But then we go to, oh, that's right, okay.
You have to tell it like you want it to run that. Okay. So do you guys want to do the bonus? Let's try it. Okay, so I'm going to let you guys lead me through this. So how would I do this? What do I type?
Dollar sign.
Sign.
That was the same as body. Oh. Do the window first.
Window. Okay, and now what?
To just copy the exact same thing, like on event name here, function.
Yeah. Oh, hey, so I forgot to do this. Thank you for reading event name here. So I need to do this when the window is resized. So let's see. Is there a resize? Hey, there's a resize. So I'm just going to type in resize. There. And here, yeah, I'm going to do dot on. And what's going to be my event? So I'm going to want to do it when the user scrolls down.
Do you type
No, I could just type. Oh, yeah, I think they're just looking for scroll in here. So I'm going to type in scroll, and then I'm going to tell it what to do. So to do that, I need to do function, and now I need to tell it what to do. So in this case, I'm going to add the party class to the body. So how would I do that? So what do I need to select, first of all? Mm-hmm. Okay. And now what method do I want to use to add a class? So let's go back. Let's see. Yes. Yeah. So I'm going to do this add class method. So I'm going to do dot add class. And now I need to give it a class. So in this case, it's going to be my party class. And let's see if that works. Hey! Look at that. I'm going to give you guys like seizures or something. Okay, so it worked. You guys did it. Congratulations. So any questions on this?
Yes, it's not working for me, so.
I don't know what the first thing does. When I
I'll
always
look at
ask
you.
them, I know it's not doing anything.
Oh, that's working.
Oh, it's resized.
So like when I'm typing it, that's like what comes up. So I have to go.
Oh, so it comes up because they already used resize in their code. Because it's trying to predict that. So now save it.
Okay, so any questions on what we just went over?
Mine's not working either. I'm still like all over the place.
So let's move on for now. Okay. So today we are going to go over variables and conditionals. So on the agenda today, variables, data types, conditionals, and then we have this lab temperature converter. So really quick, these are just methods that we had to use. So append, you need to give it like HTML in order to add to your HTML page. And it'll add it to the last thing that you're selecting. Otherwise, prepend is going to add it to the beginning. So any questions with this? Cool. Okay. So variables. First of all, what are variables? So variables are useful because we can use them in order to store information. So think of them as like little containers in our code that save information. So this is how you write code in order to make variables. So in JavaScript, you have to type var, and then you have to give that variable a name. So here we're making the variable, and here we're saying like we're calling it age. So you want to name your variable something that makes sense for whatever you're using it for. So for example, if I want to store someone's age, I'm not going to want to say var x, right? Because I'm not going to know what that is storing. So in this case, I'm saying var age. So now when I go back to look at my code, I know I'm probably going to save an age in there.
So when you store something that's like only temporarily until the page is refreshed using JavaScript, or can you store it like forever?
So if you want to store things forever, you need a database, and yeah, in JavaScript, the way that we're using it is it's only temporary. So once you like refresh the page, exactly, it's just going to go away. Okay, so in order to assign a variable, we have to give it a value. So we have to set it equal to something. And keep in mind, you can do both of those things in one step. So you can say var age, and then set it equal to 29 all in one line. And then just don't forget, you have to use a semicolon at the end of each statement. So again, semicolon, semicolon, semicolon. You need them at the end of them. So what's going on here? Any idea?
You're storing the names of the champions.
Yeah, so right here, I'm making this variable called champion, and I'm setting it equal to Sarah. But then I'm overwriting it in this line. I'm saying champion is now equal to Christine. So now when I check the value of champion, it's going to be Christine. It's no longer going to be Sarah because I overwrote it. So you're
doing that without the var. Is that how you overwrite it?
Yeah. So because we already made our variable champion, we don't have to make it again, right? We can just use it now. So now we're just taking the champion variable and setting it to Christine now. So you can rewrite the values of your variables. So these are called like assignment operators. So when you set a variable equal to something, you're assigning it a value. And so you can actually increment. So here we're just assigning a value normally. So we're just saying like num is equal to 6, or num is equal to 8, and then setting it equal to 6 later. Here we're setting it equal to 8 first, And then when we do num plus equals 6, we're adding 6 to this initial value. So we're doing 8 plus 6, 14. So now num is equal to 14. Versus here, we're making this variable var num, and we're setting it equal to 8. And then we're doing minus equals 6. And so 8 minus 6, that's 2. So now num is equal to 2. So all of these are doing is it's doing plus, so it's adding 6 and then setting it equal to that new value. Any questions? So the purpose of this is right now we're learning like all the things that we can do with variables in order to like do stuff with them in the future. So say for instance I'm making a game, right? And I have player 1 and player 2 or whatever. So in order to keep track of their scores, I'm probably going to want to like increment to their score, right? Yeah. So this is just a fancy way to increment. Or say I'm making a cash register to keep track of the totals. So I'm probably going to want to keep adding to whatever the final price is. Okay, so speaking of, let's look at this code pen. So right here, we can add, oh, but these aren't working. So I want you guys to help me to get those working. So let's go through this code. Minimize. Okay, so right here I have this result variable, and I have it equal to 0. So on my reset, it's setting it equal to 0. My add 5 is taking my result variable and it's adding 5 to it. My add 10 is taking my result and it's adding 10 to it. So now what do I want to do for this minus 1 and this minus 5? They don't exist right now. How would I add them into it? Exactly. So what am I going to want to select first of all? Yep. So I'm going to do what am I doing? Okay. Sub 1. And now what? So on click and function.
How are you getting the circles?
Oh, what circles?
Oh, is that just parentheses?
Yeah. Yeah. Those are just parentheses. So what do I want to write in here? So now I have like this click function. Now what do I want to do to my result?
Result subtract.
Minus equals to 1. And now let's see what happens. So I'm going to take this, and all this is doing is it's going to take my current total and it's going to add the result inside of the HTML. So this is where variables come in handy. So instead of like manually typing in like my new score, you can actually make it dynamic and say results. Does that make sense? Like why we would kind of want to use variables? So now this is working.
So the variable part of that code is the result.
Exactly.
The plus or minus the number.
Yep. Yeah, and then these buttons are just going to change my results value. So variables, when you're working with variables, like it can make your website very dynamic because you can actually like store things to your website for at least that like one session. So now I want to do my sub 5. So I'm just going to change that to 5, and I'm just going to subtract 5, and then this should work. Does that work for everyone? Okay. So any questions on this? Like how to set variables or why we would use them? Okay, cool. So now let's go over the rules. So variables, the way we're writing it in JavaScript is, so this is the correct way of doing it. Remember how last class I talked about the idea of camel case? So you're going to start off with a lowercase word, and then say your variable has multiple words. Each word is going to start with a capital letter. So that's called camel case, because it's like a camel, whatever. So what you're not going to want to do is start out right away with a capital letter. So it's going to start out lowercase. And then again, right here, you see how we have a space? No spaces in our variables in JavaScript. And here we have everything lowercase, and that's not right either, because it needs to start out with capital letters. And we don't want any weird symbols when we're naming our variables. So in this case, we have number -1. That's a no-go. And here we have a dot. That's also a no-go. Any questions on this? Yeah, so here we have a number, and that's fine. You can have numbers.
Why would you have number in your number?
So say I'm gonna like keep track of like multiple digits or whatever, then you could just say number 1, number 2. Okay. So variables can't start with a number, so you're gonna want to just end with a number instead. Yeah, and like I said earlier, you don't want to just like keep it vague and just say var x if you can make it a little more clear. So if I'm starting a last name, I want to say my variable is last name. Okay, so what can be stored in variables? So we're storing in results a number earlier, but we have these different data types. And we'll go over it in a bit, but just know strings, that's going to be like letters and other characters, and strings are going to be written in quotes. So these are just like words and sentences and whatever. And then you have numbers. So you can either have like a flat digit, or you can have what's called a float. And float, that's just a decimal reason why it's called float is because you have floating numbers because of the decimal. You can also store negative numbers. And finally, booleans. Booleans, those are just two values. So it's either true or it's false. So you can store them in variables also if you want. Okay, so to summarize, variable has a name and you have to give it a value. The value can change and you can use a variable multiple times throughout your code, which is nice. So order is important. So first you have to make the variable and then you're going to set it. You're not going to want to like have your value and then just set it equal to something. So let's go ahead and work on variables in your starter code. So go to part 2, so right here, the variable section. Now let's practice this. Okay. So declare a variable with the name score. Assign it the value 3. So what do I want to type? If I want to make a variable called score.
Bar score equals 3.
Ew. And what else? Yep, there you go. Okay, so now I want to update the value of the score to 6. Now what do?
Score equals 6. Circle.
Yep.
Does the spacing have to be like that, or does it matter?
It doesn't matter. The only spacing that does matter is like the space between the var and the name. Okay, so use jQuery to update the HTML of item 1 with the value of score. So how would I do that? So I'm going to want to update this. What do I select first of all? If I want to update item 1. So item 1, and now what do I want to do? So I'm going to do my, the .html method. And what am I going to put inside of the parentheses? If I put score inside of my parentheses, is that going to work?
Result.
In this case, my variable is score. So let's see if that works. Wait, oops, I didn't open it yet. Okay, so let's do that. Here we go. So yeah, now I have 6. So go ahead and work on this part, and I'll walk around and help you guys. So good question. Okay, this is actually a really good question. So if I do apostrophes, let's see what happens. It's going to say score. So the reason why I don't want to do that is because if I do apostrophes, then it's going to interpret this as a string. And really, we want to use the variable because it's storing the value that we want to display. So that's a great question that I'm so glad you asked. Okay.
We'll do the same thing with the variables.
Yeah, so if you want to do console.log, and then say you want to check to make sure that your variable is updating properly where it's supposed to be, then you can do console.log, and then you could just type in your variable name. So now if I go to my console, and if I inspect it, I'm going to see my score printed out. So what's also cool about console.log is I can also like type in jQuery in here, so I could check the results that jQuery gives me. So if I do wait, am I doing that right? Let me see. What am I gonna try to do? Actually, let's do one of the finds. Here it is. So I can actually like console.log and then type in like jQuery inside my console.log. So in this case, if I wanted to make sure that I'm like, selecting the right things in jQuery or whatever, or like check to make sure that this is doing the right thing, then I could stick it in my console.log. And now if I go to my console, I see that like it actually did print out my different list items. So I have list item 1 and list item 2. So whatever like you can think of, you can console.log it. Okay. So how are we doing with the exercise? Okay, cool. Okay, so first we want to declare a variable with the name total amount and assign it to the value of 0. So what do I do here? Cool. And a semicolon. So now how do I update total amount? Yep. So now how do I add 5 to it? So in order to add 10 or 5 to it, I'm just going to do total amount and then plus equals 5. And finally, I need to update the value of item 2. So how would I do that? What comes next? And then my method. Yep. And now what do I type in the parentheses? All right, let's see if that worked. Oops. There we go. 15. Voila. Good job, you guys. Let's carry on. Okay, so data types. Let's go over like this part. So we're gonna learn the different data types one by one. So first we are going to start with numbers. So really quick, in JavaScript you can actually do math. So earlier we were just like taking our score and adding to it, or taking our results and adding or subtracting to it. So with JavaScript you can do math in your website if you wanted to. So in this case we have our variables. So we're setting num1 is equal to 5, num2 equal to 10.5, and num3 is equal to -9. So once again, like numbers can have like positive and negative values. They can also have like decimal values if you wanted it to. And you have access to arithmetic operators in JavaScript. So plus is plus, minus is minus, times is going to be this asterisk. So the computer reads this as like you trying to multiply something. And finally, you have your division is a slash. So any questions on this so far? So here we're console.logging it. So if we look at our console, we see that like it actually evaluates the correct number. So we're saying like 4 plus 2 is 6. 4 minus 2 is 2. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So again, when you have whole numbers, these are called integers. That's the data type that we're going to be working with. If it has decimals, that's called a float, because you have floating numbers at the end of the decimal. So any questions with numbers? Cool. So strings. Let's take a look at this code pen. I keep getting shocked every time I like slide in my chair. Okay. I'm gonna minimize. So here we have string 1, Sarah. String 2 is equal to S. String 3 is equal to 5. And string 4 is equal to string. And here we have this bar question, and we have this, this long sentence here. So what is this doing, do you think? Any idea of what escape might mean? Okay, so say we want to use quotes inside of our strings. So without this, you see what happens? It's going to end my string at this point. So in order to use quotes, if we're starting it with like double quotes here, we have to end it with double quotes, right? So in order to use quotes inside of my string, I need to escape those quotes. That's just a word for saying like, I have to tell the computer this is actually what I want to do. I want to use quotes in here. So in order to escape it, you have to put a slash in front of the double quote. And now the computer will interpret this as you wanting to use quotes inside of your string. So any questions with that?
Where are you using this? Exactly? Like, is it a pop-up or form?
No, so this is just, I mean, you can. So like say you have a website and your user logs in and you want to say like, hello, Casilda or whatever. Then you would probably have a variable in your website that holds that user's name. And then you'll just like print it out on the page in your HTML. So that's how you would escape different characters. So with strings, you have different methods that you can use on them. So for example, on line 13, I'm doing console.log and then mary.length. And so let's see what that gives us. So console.log mary.length, that gives us 4. So you can check the length of different strings if you wanted to. So you might want to do that in case like, say your user is typing in a password and it has to be a minimum of 8 characters long. You can check to make sure that it's 8 characters long if you do .length on whatever they typed in. So you can also change the way that text looks in JavaScript. So here we're changing Susie to uppercase letters using the dot to uppercase method. And so now it's going to look like this. So it's going to print Susie in all caps. Oh, so if you click on console at the bottom of it, and then you just like yank it up. Okay. So you can also make it all lowercase if you wanted to. So now this is useful because say like your user types in whatever content that you are trying to get from them and you need it to be in a certain format, you can change it using JavaScript to whatever you do need. So finally, you can also do string concatenation. So all that means is you can add strings together. So in this case, we have this book variable and this summary variable. And here in this review, we're concatenating those strings together. We're adding the strings together to make a complete sentence. So here it comes out, Franny and Zoe is the best book ever. So this is useful if you want to like make your website more personable. So again, like say you're saying like, hello Adriana, how was your day or whatever. You can use string concatenation to put together a nice personalized message. So any questions with this? Cool. Okay. So once again, a string stores textual information surrounded by quotes. So you're not going to want to, for example, if you're going to do math, you're not going to want to store your number in a string because it's going to interpret it as a string and not a number. So I can't do string 3 plus 5. Let's see what that gives me. So if I do console.log, it gives me 55 instead of like 8. Does that make sense? So it's literally just taking my 5 and adding another 5 to it. So it's not going to do math correctly with strings. Okay. So double quotes versus single quotes. So if you use double quotes for a string, then you can use single quotes inside of it. Likewise, if you use single quotes, then you can use double quotes inside of it. But if you're trying to use single quotes inside single quotes, you have to do that escaping that I talked about earlier. And same with double quotes. If you're trying to use double quotes inside of it, you need to escape it. Okay, and then this is just a summary of like different properties or methods that you can use with strings. And if you click on that link, it'll give you a list of different methods that you can use on strings. And that's just a summary about string concatenation. So any questions with strings? Cool. So Booleans. Booleans have only 2 values, either true or false. So any questions with Booleans? Okay. So I mean, the reason why you might want to use like Booleans is like we're gonna learn conditional logic later. But say like you want to do something over and over again unless it's false, then you're gonna have to like use booleans in order to do that logic. I'm not gonna have you do that. Okay, so let's go over conditionals now. What time is it? So let's take a break. Let's take a 10-minute break because conditionals can get a little fuzzy. So, yeah, go ahead, take your break.
Something here that we can use with tea, possibly?
I don't know. I would ask Frontlines.
Your turn is up here.
What?
That one.
Maybe.
No. Try save battery power.
Maybe turn your Wi-Fi off or something. I don't know. So I have any of you guys had Figure Eye? Yeah, really as good as like everyone.
You are obsessed with that. I would love to.
I've never
especially
had.
in Europe, Kinder is like way chocolate.
I know. So like
I hadn't thought of that.
people keep like really, oh, you can't have Kinder because you're in the U.S. So I'm gonna send me some. Like, is it really like that good?
Yeah, it's like a different taste for it, but well, I can't really know, but you're obsessed.
It better have like something cool inside of it.
Mm-hmm.
cream?
Yeah, I found almond milk.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So when we were doing pseudocode, and when we were thinking about how to make that temperature program that keeps track of like the room's temperature and sets it to the desired temperature, we had to have like some logic in there where it was like, if the temperature is lower, then do this, or if it's higher, then do that. There had to be like some logic in there. So today we're going to learn how to actually do that. Okay, so what are conditionals? Let's see. What? That's not it. What the heck? I swear to God, it was Bill Gates. I I don't know. Here it is. This is. Am I like a letter off? Yeah, I'm just gonna start it over. Okay. Okay. Sorry, Mark Zuckerberg. I just want to listen to Bill Gates. Okay. That was really weird, though. I'll look at that later. So, with conditional logic, basically what you're saying like is if something is true, then do this one thing. If it's not, then do something else. And so this is called a condition. So in JavaScript, you need to make like these comparisons in general for websites. So you want to either check like if users are logged in, or to see like if they chose the maximum options or whatever. There has to be like some conditions that you want to check. So you have these comparison operators. So with comparison operators, first of all, what I want to make clear is like when you have one equal sign, like we were doing before when we were setting variables, that's called an assignment operator. So one equals is an assignment operator because you're assigning a value to something versus when we're using like these equal signs, so a triple equals, there's also a double equals. That's just comparing things. So these are comparison operators. So with comparison operators, you can check to see if something is greater than or equal to, or you can just check if something's greater than, or less than or equal to, or just check if it's you can check if it's equal to or not equal to something. And this is how you would write it in JavaScript. So again, so here we're assigning a value to something. So we're saying var number is equal to 7. So we're setting that value, we're assigning it a value to 7. Versus here, we're comparing something. So we're saying like if number is equal to 8, then do whatever I say here. So now what I want to go over is like the triple equals versus the double equals. Essentially, I mean, it's mostly going to do the same, but this is stricter than double equals. Double equals is just going to check to see if like the value is the same. Triple equals is going to check the value and the data type to see if the data type is the same also. So for our purposes, we're just always going to use triple equals because this is like the most accurate.
So it would, the double equals be a string 5 the same as a number, or bar 5?
Let's check it out. Okay, so let's go to this. Let's go to through this code together. So I'm just gonna minimize. Okay. So var strict 1, we are setting. Let me bring up my console. Let me just clear that. Oh, is that the only thing I'm console logging? Okay, yeah. So here I'm console logging strict 1 and console logging strict 2. So you see here, that's exactly what you were saying. So I'm checking 5 to see if it's equal to 5. That's true. And here I'm checking to see if 5 is equal to the string 5. And that's also true. But if I change this to triple equals, damn it, why didn't it change? There we go. I'm like, why isn't it? Okay, it's false. So yes, it's more strict because it's going to check the data type. And because this is a string, it's not the same. So any questions between the difference? Yay. Okay. So, I'm just going to comment that out.
I don't understand though. When you add the triple, the extra equal sign,
Yeah.
and it says false, but then when you delete that, then it says false, and then it adds an extra double truths. You know what I mean? Like mine says true, true, false, true, true.
Okay, so the true, that was before I added the triple. So this was before when they were both double equal. And now that I added, exactly. Yeah, so you have to press clear in order to clear it out. Okay, so, ta-da, now it's true instead of true and false. Okay, so now let's take a look at this. So here we are checking to see if it's not equal to something. So it's saying like 5 is not equal to Jimmy. So let's see what that gives us. So I'm going to clear this, and now I'm going to console.log not equal 1. Now let's see what that gives us. So that gives us true because 5 is not equal to Jimmy. So when you're checking to see like if something is equal to or not equal to, it's always going to result in a Boolean. So now, what do you think this is going to give me? If I console log not equal to 2, not equal to. Is it going to give me true or false? You say false? Do you guys agree? Oops, yeah. There you go. It does give me false. Yay! So why does it give me false? So here we're checking to see, we're saying like 37 is not equal to 37, but it is, because 37 is 37. So does that make sense? Like why that wouldn't result? Okay. So I'm not going to console.log these. I'm just going to talk about them. So you can check to see if 5 is greater than 7. So this would result in false because it's not. Versus 7 is greater than 5. This will evaluate to true because 7 is greater than 5. And then 5 is less than 7, so this will evaluate to true, and this will evaluate to false. And these are just different examples. We don't have to do that. Actually, let's go over it. So 5 is greater than or equal to 7. What's that going to give me? Yeah, false. So this is going to give me false. What about this? Yep, true. True. This one? True. This one? That one's going to be false. And then this one is going to be true because 5 is equal to 5. So now what about this? What is, if I console log this, what am I going to get, do you think? Yeah, because I'm setting me is equal to false, and now I'm saying not me, so not false. So let's see if I clear that, then do console.log. True. Does that make sense? So we're saying not me. So in this case, me is equal to false, so I'm saying not false. So not false, so it's true. Okay, so let's move on. So if statements. So with if statements, this is going to be the syntax that we're going to follow. So first we have to say if, and then parentheses, and then we need to give it a condition to check. So here we're saying if answer is equal to 38, then do this. Okay. So here, what we're saying is what?
If they're 65, give them a senior discount.
Exactly. So like if they're 65 or older, we're going to give them a senior discount. So now if we want to add more logic to our website, we can say like, if this, do this, else, so like if it's not this one condition, and if for anything else, it's going to run whatever you say here. for example, let's say I'm running a website that sells alcohol for whatever reason, and I'm saying like if age is greater than or equal to 21, then say go crazy. Else, if they're not, like, because they're obviously either going to be like younger, there's no other possibility. I'm gonna say sorry, man, can't do it. So again, here we're checking to see if they're greater than 65, and if they're not, then sorry, you do not qualify for the discount. So now we can even get more fancy, and we can say if answer is equal to 38, then do this. Else if, and then we can give it another condition to check in order to do something else. Otherwise, this is going to be the rest of the situation. So this is going to be your catch-all if these two don't meet the requirement. So in this example, we're saying if they're younger than 18, we're going to apply a student discount. So we're adding this other piece of logic. And then otherwise, there's no discount for that person if they don't meet the senior discount or the student discount. Okay, I'm going to minimize. Okay, so let's pick a topic. Oh, jQuery. Let's see what happens. You're learning something else. So now let's take a look at this code. So we're saying when the user clicks this topic button, so we have this topic on click function. Let's see what we're doing. So what's this saying? Then what's it going to do?
So let's say you're learning JavaScript.
Yep.
And then if you enter JavaScript, you're still learning JavaScript.
Yep.
But if you enter anything else, it will say you're learning something else.
Exactly. Yep. So let's see how that works. So if I type in JS, yes, you're learning JavaScript. And if I type in JavaScript, you're still learning JavaScript. Yep. So what's cool about this is you see how right here I'm prompting the user like what is the topic, and then here I'm taking whatever they typed in, but I'm doing to lowercase. So say I type in capital JS, it'll take care of that problem for me because it's going to make it lowercase. That way it does match whatever we're checking. So instead of having like another else if statement saying like if topic is equal to and then capital JS, we're taking care of that problem by setting it lowercase to begin with.
So it doesn't matter how they type it in.
Exactly.
Still recognize it.
Yeah. So in case you guys were wondering like when these methods come in handy, this is where it comes in handy. That way like you could set it to one format. Okay. So let's go ahead and practice writing conditionals. See if we can get the hang of it. So go to your starter code. And we have this conditionals exercise to do. Okay, so So first, it's telling me to declare a variable with the name number 1 and to assign it the value 4. So what do I type here? How do I make a variable? Yep. And now I want to set it equal to 4. Yeah. Semicolon. Now I want to declare a variable with the name number 2 and assign it the value 10. So var number 2 is what I'm going to name it, and I'm going to set it equal to 10. Put a semicolon at the end. So now I'm going to want to write out an if, else statement for the following conditions. So if number is equal to number 2, then I'm going to do this. So how would I write that? First step. So what do I want to start typing? If. And then what symbols do I need?
4 equals 10.
If what? 4 is equal to. But in this case, I want to use my variables. Yep. So if number 1 is equal to number 2. Am I missing anything? How is this looking so far? Okay, so now what?
Just the same thing, but uncommented.
So is this going to work? So let's see. So just to test it out, I'm going to set this equal to 4. So now they are equal to each other. So let's see if this works. So I'm going to open this up. So nothing happened. So what do I want to do? I'm going to open up my console to see what errors I'm getting. Okay, so I'm getting an error on line 12. So let's go to line 12. So what's wrong with this line? Yeah, so I'm missing parentheses. Okay, so now is this going to work? Does that look good? I think it looks good. Let's see. 4 is equal to 4. It works. Okay, so I'm going to set this equal to 10 again because I don't want to test that anymore. Okay, so now I want to write this else if statement. So how do I write that? What do I type in?
And then parentheses number 1 plus the number 2.
And then I'm going to uncomment this out. So does that look good? What do you guys think? Is this going to work? Yep, so I need to add this if. So now let's see. So now I'm saying if number 1 is equal to number 2, then do that. Else if number 1 is smaller than number 2, then do this. So let's see if that works. Yep, good job. So now, last but not least, I want to do an else statement. Because what if my number is greater than number 2? Then I'm not going to be handling that situation. So let's see what happens right now. So nothing happens. So I need to prepare for that situation. So now I need an else. So what do I type? Yep. And then now what symbol? Yep, bracket.
What are you doing again?
The else. This last part. And I'm just going to comment that. So now I can actually handle that situation where my number 1 is greater than my number 2. It can actually do something. So now it's going to print 12 is greater than 10. But in this case, because we want it just to equal to 4, it's going to just print out 4 is less than 10. So you guys will get a lot of practice with today's lab. We'll see it in a bit. Anyways, let's keep going. So any questions so far on conditionals? Yeah.
Can you look at my problem? I'm saying that unexpected bracket. Before you go, you have to go back to the other your page real quickly.
Yeah. Yay. Getting shocked.
Oh.
It's like static shock because I slide in. Okay. Okay, so logical operators. So these are logical operators. So 2 ampersands means and 2 bars means or, and the exclamation point means not. So say we want to check 2 conditions at once. So here we're saying if the name is equal to GA and the password is equal to yellow pencil, then do this. So in this case, this all needs to be true. Does that make sense? So we're checking 2 conditions here. This is our first condition, and this is our second condition. And because we're using and, both of these have to be true in order for this code to run. We'll see that in a bit. Okay, so here, what we're saying is, so we have this like small mini form here where we're taking in a name and a password. And so when we click the sign in button, we are going to, let me just minimize this. Minimize that. So when we hit the sign in button, we are going to set this name variable equal to this value. So we're going to grab the user's value that they typed in using this .val method. So .val, that's a jQuery method, and that just grabs the user input of a certain field. So now we have that name variable with the user input of name. And now we're doing the same for password. So we're going to grab whatever the user typed in, the password field, and we're going to set it equal to the password variable. So we have their name and their password stored. So now here we're using that variable. So we're doing if name is equal to GA and the password is equal to yellow pencil, then it's going to alert me saying that I have access. Otherwise, if it's not equal to that, then it's going to do my else and it's going to say try again.
So are you saying they would literally have to type in GA for name and yellow pencil for the password in order to gain access?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's see how that works. So if I'm going to type in GA, and then I'm going to type in yellow pencil. So it says you have access. So this is only because I'm using and. So I'm saying like both of these conditions have to be true in order for this to execute. But say I use or. What do you think is going to happen? So if I type in GA here, and if I type in bloop here, what's going to happen?
You would still gain access because you have the GA, right?
Exactly. So now I have still, you have access. And that's because I'm saying or. So if either one is true, then it's going to execute. So only one of them has to be true in this case. So there's one thing that we haven't used, and that's the not. So I'm just going to use that here really quick, just to show you guys. Oh, wait. Here we go. So if name is equal to GA or password, and then I'm just going to say, or let's just do and. So if name is equal to GA and password is not equal to yellow pencil, then I'm going to have access. So let's try that. So GA, whatever, sign in, I have access because it wasn't equal to yellow pencil. So any questions on how these operators work? Cool. Okay.
Yeah. Question. So, what would be the difference between both of them? Like, it seems like this is kind of have both ends up. But are they different forms, types of forms? As far as this one, the top one, and then the sign one? I feel like it's basically different forms, right? So if you go to so here, and yeah, it's like a different form. Here this is in the opposite yeah, versus in the other one is
Okay. So, let's just talk about briefly input and button elements. We're going to go more in depth with forms later on in this course. But just so you guys know, when you're making a form, you have an input field and you have a button for the user to click on in order to submit it. So this is how you would make that input field. So here we have an input tag for HTML. And here we're saying type text because it's going to accept text. So that's just going to change how your input field looks. So it's going to look like this with a little bar. That way the user can type it in. And then this placeholder is whatever is going to show up in your box to prompt the user like what to type. So here it's saying enter your name. If you wanted the user to enter their email, then you would change that to email. So enter your email. So that's just going to prompt the user to like what you want to get from them. And then finally, you have your button element. So that's just going to be a button in your HTML. And it's going to be a type button. And then in between, it's going to be whatever you want it to say. So in this case, it's sign me up. And now you can grab the value of whatever the user typed in with JavaScript. So in jQuery, you have this .val method. So you can select your input field and you can do .val, and it would get whatever the user typed in. And if you wanted to, you can actually change the input value. So you would do that by passing it a value that you want to have. So any questions with this? Okay, so finally, the last thing I want to talk about is converting data types. So when we use the jQuery.val method, it's always going to take in a string. So even if the user types in a number, when you do the .val, it's going to give it to you in a string. So say you actually want to work with a number, you're going to have to convert it in some way to a number, because otherwise it's going to interpret it as a string, and you're not going to be able to work with that value. So luckily we have data type conversion. So we can actually convert strings to integers, strings to float, numbers to strings. So you do that by using these functions in JavaScript. So here, there's this parseInt function. And how that works is, first of all, you need to give it the string to work with. And then the second parameter is how long you want it to be. So that's just an example of how you would want to do that. So here, what we're saying is we have this float string, and it's set to this number, but like in a string, and we can do parse float. And what that's going to do is it's going to literally just take the string and return 3.14159. So it's going to return a float. So it's going to return that decimal number. And here, number to string, we're saying number dot to string, and it's just going to change whatever number we have into a string. So any questions with this?
Do you have any examples using these?
Oh, geez. I'll have you do that in a bit. So, actually, maybe I should use this instead. Let me take a look here. Okay. So what was I going to show you an example of? Oh yeah, the parsing. Okay, so let's see how this works. So let's start with string to integer. So here I'm going to take in my name when I hit sign in. So now what if I do console.log name, and then I'm going to convert whatever I type in. So let's use this parse int function. I'm going to do parse, and then I'm going to do my string. So in this case, I'm going to do my name. So parse int name. And I'm going to console log that. So I'm going to do, let's just set it to a new variable. So int is equal to that. So now I'm going to do console.log int. Let's see what that gives me. You see how the first thing that it console.logs. So when I typed it in, because the dot value returns a string, the first thing that got console.logs was that initial name value that I got. So in this case, it's going to be 4 in a string. And now I'm going to parse it into an integer, into a number. So now I get back 4. So now let's see what happens if I type in 4.00 and then hit sign in. You see how when I typed it in, it was 4.00, but when I changed it into an int, it cut off those zeros. So that's because I did parse int. So parse int is going to return a whole number. It's not going to return any decimals. So even if I do 4.95 and I do sign in, it's still going to return only 4. So it's not going to do any rounding. Just an FYI. And actually, let's go back. Hold on. What was I going to show you? Is that working? No, it's not. Hold on. I'm gonna show you. Oh yeah. So now let's try the parse float. So if I do 3.14, and if I do parse float instead, let's see what happens. So 3.14, and then I hit sign in. So now it actually gives me 3.14. And that's because I did parse floats instead of just parse int. So finally, number 2 string. So that I can't show you like in the input field. This is just straight up like in the console because no matter what I type in, it's always going to be a string. So if I do var age and then 51 console.log age, save it. Why aren't you working? You're working now. Am I missing something? No, right? Oh, because it's still in the sign in. Hello. Okay, so console.log age, and then if I do my toString method, this is how I have to use it. So I need to do age.toString, and it should return that number in a string. So let's see how that works. So I'm just going to hit sign in because that's how. 51. Oh, I'm not console.logging yet. Console.log age toString. So now I turned that number into a string. So any questions on those methods? Okay, so go ahead and practice working with user input. And the starter code. Yeah. Huh? Um, oh, I guess you're right. Okay. Well, I mean, you're going to get practice with it in today's lab anyway. So work on the blackout for now, and then do the temp converter afterwards. So the temp converter is going to be it needs to work like this. So if I enter a value, then it needs to change the background color accordingly. So like whatever the feels like temperature is. So let's just say if it's above 60 degrees to make it hot. Or no, let's change it to if it's above 75 degrees to make it red, a background color of red. And if it's below it, then it's not going to be, then it's going to be blue. Okay? Because here you're going to have to work with the input value anyway and do some kind of conversion. So any questions on what we're going to be working on tonight? Okay. And really quick, for homework, I want you guys to finish today's lab and all of your JavaScript code for this week that we've been working on, but also work on your wireframes. So,
So when you say
yeah.
that, do you want us to like draw it out or something?
So you can draw it out, or you can use like whatever websites that you find that you like to use for wireframes. But yeah, otherwise you can draw it out and bring it to class next time. And what I want you guys to really think about when you're working on your wireframes is how it's going to look on desktop, tablet, and on phones. So I want like 3 different wireframes for you guys.
Does it only need to be? Does it only? You want to like the like borders, or like could it be like an Adobe Illustrator file, like what you want?
Yeah, that's fine. Like anything, it's fine. As long as like I have some idea of like what you're going for. Did you fill out your certificate?
Right before that.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
No problem.
Work on this.
Okay. And if you guys want markers or anything, that way you could like see the code. Just go ahead and grab them. There's going to be walking around. I'll let me stop the recording. Otherwise, they're going to be like,
Is the recording gonna go on the website? Or on Slack or on the view?
I'll put on both. That's fine. Okay, so my screen is so tiny.